G'day and welcome to Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today I'm really excited to have along Aaron Sice. He's the Assistant Director at the Housing Industry Association. He's been a lecturer at REWA on residential design codes and strategic developments. And he's worked for some of the bigger developers around Perth, both in house and as a consultant. He's basically seen what works and what doesn't, and seen a whole range of mistakes made by investors over the years. And today I wanted to pull apart and get his inside view on Perth property development. And we also touch on and go actually pretty deep into the proposed R code changes to medium density. And we're also going to talk about what potential impacts that's going to have on our market. So let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
Hey, Aaron, how you going?
Good, mate. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you coming along. I know we've got a lot to talk about today, and as we've found in some of our lunch catch-ups, we can get pretty off track. So see where we go with this, eh?
Yeah, let's see where this lands.
I was actually trying to remember when we first met, and it was a long time ago, I know that, and we're both still pretty young, even though we were just talking about how old we feel with your kids going into high school and my world changing with the 2-year-old. But I think it might have been. I know it was a property investment group, and I think it was.
Yeah, it was WAIP, West Australians Investing in Property.
The acronym, yes.
Yeah, it was held at Technology Park. It was like Brodie Drive or something in Belmont.
And how old do you reckon you would have been around? Well, how long ago?
I think it was actually before I had my first child, which is now coming up.
I was thinking about 15 years ago. Yeah, that was mine. Yeah.
It's a long time, man.
I know. So either we've been around this investment space for a while, both as learners and, investors, and then later found our paths into, our different niches in property. And so how do you kind of fit into the puzzle these days? Because I know you've done a lot over the years and seen a lot, and we're going to unpack some of that today. But what does the picture look like now for you?
Now for me, so I've just come off the back of lecturing at REWA. So I was doing that for about five and a half years, teaching people about the R codes, because there was a whole bunch of different changes going on, very small nuance changes. And that's really since the 2010 amendment that introduced plot ratio for multi-dwellings. I hope everyone knows about that one, because some people still don't. However, now I'm actually the assistant director for the Housing Industry Association. So I cover all the building side of things, which is the NCC changes and the technical issues to do with Australian standards and standards committees. And I'll run two committees here as well, planning and technical. And I'm also responsible for planning. So that is everything from the upcoming medium density codes through to the new interim housing policy, and being involved with consulting and collaborating on a number of different SPPs. And so just being a real member advocate for the industry, being able to fight the good fight at a strategic level rather than at the coalface as a statutory level, as an upstart loudmouth building designer.
And there is a lot of money to be made in the nuances, and also mistakes to be made, and you would have seen a lot of them over the years, wouldn't you?
Part of the reason actually I got out there with that R codes lecturing was to tell people, hey, that 3x2 villa at R40 is not your only option, and to really educate agents with the understanding about how to correctly appraise that parcel of land.
Well, you certainly made a lot more agents know the true value of properties. Thanks for that, Aaron, on behalf of all property investors.
Well, the funny thing is that they still didn't understand it. There were people doing my course 4 and 5 times, and they'd still walk away going, I don't understand how it's 20 apartments. I'm like, because you just do the maths and it's 20 apartments.
Don't worry, listeners. There's plenty of agents that don't know what they're doing out there still.
They just don't get it. So, yeah. I mean, I often tell them, one of the first things I used to do was I didn't put in, when you're looking for a site for a client or something like that, that you in the old days you'd put in, R40 or R60 or unit sites or development potential into your search engine.
Yeah, yeah, you put in as a
But
key
that
term.
brings
Yep.
up all the people that know what they're talking about.
Exactly. Yep.
So what you look for is you'd actually look for, my search function was STCA, subject to council approval, because then you always find the sites that people don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, you need to look at the ones that don't have any keywords as well. It's the agent that's got no clues, often out of area.
They're a lot harder to find. So it's just the
Yeah.
guys that, or the girls out there that have a feeling that it's a development site, but don't quite know what it is. And
Yeah,
well,
you went the middle road of some idea, but
honey,
just
you just walk in and go, oh, it's not much. Give you this, and then you turn around and you buy a 17-unit site, and then 6 months later, it's 117 apartments.
yeah, wow. And you've also worked as a consultant, and I think you might have even been in-house at one stage for some of the larger developers.
Yeah, for a long time actually in-house. Developed everything really, house and land packages, apartments, over 55s developments, and I've also been involved with a number of different alternative construction methods as well,
Oh,
and
yeah.
what that entails. And you'd be amazed at how many local governments don't allow alternative construction methods, which is really
Okay.
funny.
Perth's always been very backward all round, especially when it comes to construction. So,
Yeah, well, if you want to do something really cool and funky, like tiny houses or something like that, you have to build it out of timber frame. You can't look at a particular panel. You can't look at sea containers, or you can't look at this, or you can't do these
yeah.
things as the local governments. So yeah, housing stock in Perth is very homogenised, and it's quite difficult to break up.
I guess because it is so homogenized, even when there's slight variations, people shy away from it.
Lose their minds. They lose their minds, Jared. Especially with communities. Like, you start talking about communities where you want to put 6 two-bed apartments in an area that's known for 3 4-bed townhouses. Massing's exactly the same. The outcome for the cars are exactly the same, but people just lose their minds. And so you get local governments all around the city that ban multi-dwellings, or can only do multi-dwellings with a land use component instead of the plot ratio allowance. And yeah, all these kind of tips and traps. And it's just, what do? You can only fight it so much before you have to just cave.
Yeah. Do you feel like the way that the R codes were changed retrospectively in the past could have been done any differently or better?
It could have been better, I'll tell you that. Yeah, well, I think, yeah, the R codes are really difficult. They don't recognize that modern construction typology, and they really don't recognize modern lot typologies as well. So talking about house behind a house, we're talking about narrow lots, sloping lots like infill lots.
Yep.
We're talking about squat lots. Like if you've got a 12 by 20 lot, something like that, forget it. Like, R codes just don't work. The R codes are really designed for that typical sort of
Yeah.
350 plus lot that's, a 1:2 ratio. It's like a 15 by 30, or it's a 20 by 40 or something like that. It's not designed for these new modern lot typologies. So that's why you see a proliferation of the old DAP or the LDP now. The RMDs were introduced for new estates to try and address some of this, and then they forgot to apply 2 stories to it.
Okay.
Again, my head spins. But you've got a lot of these. A lot of it was driven by people who just didn't understand industry. And I don't know if you're aware or not, but just recently the medium density policy changes have been released, and the effort that DPLH have gone to, which is the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, DPLH have put a lot of effort into industry testing, with not only the outcomes, but then also gone and costed those outcomes to make sure they're
Oh, great.
actually viable, and used quantity surveyors. They've used project builders. They've used independent designers. They've used designers from project builders as well. They've used,
So it's been a lot more thought out this time.
yeah, and they've used architects as well. So they've really,
Because I felt like the changes last time created a lot of negative impacts, which I can understand, citizens in councils not liking, but it kind of put a bit
yeah,
of a tarnished the medium density and high density with a bit of a bad brush.
You
And
literally hit the nail on the head, mate. Communities can't stand it because it's not delivering what they expected. It's not bringing about the outcomes that they thought or that they value. They
yeah,
value those established trees. They value those kind of setbacks and having that
yeah,
suburban feel. So when you go into suburbia and you say, "Oh, I'm just going to bring Northbridge with me," of course they don't like it. So you've got local governments that yeah, well they're caught between a rock and a hard place as well
yeah,
because local governments when they develop a local planning policy, right? That's the kind of social contract that they've got with their electorate, right? So that's what they're saying. We're going to develop this. If everyone agrees, this is what we're going to put on the ground. And then medium density comes along and basically undermines the whole thing. So, yes, there's this huge outrage in that space. So, what this is doing, this not only is being tested by industry, with industry, and for industry, it's also being tested with communities and with local governments as well. So
great.
local governments can turn around and say, hang on a minute, how does this fit into our scope? How does this fit into what our electorate want? And the communities also turn around and they say, well, how does this protect trees? How does this encourage green spaces? How does this encourage quality built form outcomes and considerate design? So that's where I think DPLH have really gone to town this time and they've really understood what Perth want. Now, you know what? It's not going to be perfect for communities. It's not going to be perfect for local governments, and it sure isn't going to be perfect for builders and developers. But it's a heck of a lot better than what we've seen in the past. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
So, what do you think? Just take a step back for a minute, but you would have come across and many investors worked for different developers. Why is property development, I guess, so appealing, so sexy for most? The allure of being a property developer and telling your friends at your barbecue.
Say I'm a property developer at the local barbecue, but
Yeah,
but I don't know, to be honest, because property development and everything it entails, when you look at the rules you've got to work through, you've got to look at the risks that you take on personally.
because you're on the inside and you see what goes into any project to make it a success. And yeah, you can get lucky and pull off a basic project, the first time, but some people certainly bite off more than they can chew more often than not.
Luck can sometimes actually really come into it, but yeah, you have to think about all the things you're putting on the line and then ask yourself, is 20% actually a reasonable rate of return for
Yeah.
that risk? And then some people don't focus on percentage, they focus on dollar value. And then you're saying, what you just want, like, what, 50 grand or 100 grand out of this? Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay, but you took on $4 million worth of debt to get that. Are you sure that's
Yeah.
acceptable? So I really do struggle with the idea that property development is sexy. It's not. It's dangerous. It's risky. If you're a first timer, yep, you can luck out, which is great.
And when the market's going with people as well, it does correct. When the market's going with you, as we're starting to experience, it does start to correct mistakes and people look, yeah,
They all come out of the woodwork, and then they use that work they put into the bull market in the bear market to sell courses and mentorship and all this kind of stuff. And
yeah.
meanwhile,
And we've
they're
seen
they're not
all of
holding
the
back.
various spruikers and people that have come and gone.
Even just local, I call them Perthanalities because they're from Perth and they reckon they understand the market, and and you know what they do in a bull market. But I've never seen these people reliably create returns in a bear market.
Yeah.
And when they do create returns, they're so subpar, but for some reason they're just blindly accepted because they're a personality.
Yeah.
Just it bugs me. I've been around a lot. You can probably tell I'm a little bit jaded by some of this, but it's
Yeah.
really frustrating to see. Like it's really risky being a property developer, and I think the reason that first
And that's what
timers,
I'm trying to, I guess, show with this podcast is that, you know, there is a lot involved in property development, and to go into it with experts around you. And, it's certainly not always what it cracks up to be. Because if you had bought a,
especially as you get bigger and start chasing the bigger deals, and that's why I was just saying, I think first timers get a different sense of what happens because they're taking on the simple projects.
yeah,
They've actually taken the time, the real time, to find the lowest risk best return project. And often it comes with just doing a splitter on a corner block or
Yep.
renovating a 3x1 in an established leafy suburb into a 5x2.
Find
You
the
know,
best area you can afford and, hold quality properties. And if you can add value to that, great.
that's exactly that's what they do. And I think people forget that if you just rinsed and repeated that process all the way
Mm,
through, you would be a very successful person by the end of it in
yeah,
that space. You don't have to keep ratcheting up the complexity. You don't have to keep ratcheting up
yeah,
the
greatness.
difficulty and the returns. If you find something good and you found a niche and you can exploit it, run with it.
Yeah, rinse and
Someone once
repeat.
told me that the 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 best thing you can do is find a niche that's an inch wide and a mile deep. It's the one that everyone steps over. And once you find that niche, just keep run with it, run in the vein. It's like mining for gold. You find the vein, you just keep mining the vein. You don't go, oh, gee, there's a bigger mountain over there. I'll go start over there. Why? You've got an established vein of gold right in front of you. Just keep running with that one until it exhausts itself. And the great thing is as well is that you can make money in up and down markets by doing the smaller deals. Whereas if you want to start putting 10 apartments on the ground in North Perth, well, what exactly do you think is gonna happen when the market turns? When you get black swan events like COVID or a global financial crisis or increased lending criteria because of ASIC, what happens then?
And we've seen all of these over the last 3 to 5 years.
It's yeah, I struggle with the idea that property development is sexy.
So who do you reckon should consider property development then?
Depends on the kind of property development you're talking about, I guess.
It's a big question when I mentioned development because it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people,
It
can't it?
does. There's so many different options for property development. I think that might be a better one,
Yeah.
a better question to consider is that you've got to understand the different kinds. Like, for example, if you go to Bayswater and you cut an old house in half and you relocate it to, I don't know, Kalgoorlie, for example, and you insulate it, rewire it, reclad it, that might be cheaper than building in Kalgoorlie, and you've generated 50 grand's worth of equity before you've even started. There's an option for people. You've got options to take a standard block and cut it in half. Go look for an R20 block that's a corner block or has two street frontages, and you can develop it at minimum.
Yep.
Most people don't know that, but that's entrenched in planning law at the moment, and that applies to nearly every R20 suburb that exists.
Yeah. So just to explain when you said develop it at minimum, what does that mean for
So there's minimum and average lot sizes.
the starting out?
So for R20, it's 450. So most people think that a 900 square meter block is an R20 duplex block, which it is if it
Yep.
doesn't have any additional street frontage. But if it does, then not necessarily a corner lot either. Like it might have a front and a rear street frontage. You can develop it at minimum, which is 350. So you only need 700 square meters. So if you've got a corner lot,
Yeah.
let's say
Big difference, isn't it?
780, that's a duplex lot at R20 without having to apply a 5%. So there's all those little tips and
Yeah.
traps in there. And like I said, the previous one was like renovating a 3-1 to be a 5-2 in an appropriate suburb. Like, for example, if you found a cool old 3x1 in Floreat, go
Yeah.
nuts. You know, there's all those different kinds of property development. But then, of course, you move into what happens with a green title 240 square meter R40 lot. Well, that's two single bed dwellings, or it's two-bed apartments, or it's one, I don't know, maybe 4x2 or 5x2 as a two-story. There's so many different
Yeah.
options there for people to take advantage of. So just choose your market, know your market, and make sure you're responsible with what you're putting on the ground. Especially if you're putting $4 million out there to get 50 grand, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. So what are the keys to what makes someone successful from what you've seen? Can you boil it down to any
Yeah,
steps
I
or
reckon it's just finding that niche.
yeah.
Finding that niche that works for you and that you understand and the market understands you and what you're delivering. There's so many companies out there that are 2 and 3 person bands that just go around, they find duplex sites, they cut them in half and they build and sell. Rinse, repeat,
Yep.
rinse, repeat. And they're successful people
Get really good at it.
because they've found that one thing that works for them. You look at some of the renovation people around town as well. They just do the one thing. They
Yep.
find a 3-bedder and make it a 4-bedder. They might find a 4-bedder and make it a 6-bedder. They do HMOs. I mean, you've got people doing multiple tenancies under the one roof. That's something that works. It pays down debt pretty quickly as well. So what's a successful deal? I guess it depends on, it really does depend on where you are. First timers really need to think about their research and what they're doing.
Yep.
But just because you're a third-time property developer does not mean
Yeah.
you need to move away from that model either if it's working.
Yeah, no, good message. On the flip side of that, you've mentioned some of the common mistakes already about taking on too much too soon and, stepping out of your lane and, trying to always get bigger for bigger sake. Is there any other, I guess, major things, especially from within your space, that trip people up and are more common mistakes that
Most definitely.
I guess make a site not profitable or make a site not where someone can't do what they think they tend to do?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. Look, I've designed everything from 3 apartments on 240 square meters through to hotels almost on 450 square meters that are 9 stories high and everything in between. And I can tell you that the number one way that people come unstuck is, especially in the apartment space, not employing a project manager to get between planning approval and your CDC or your building permit approval stage.
Okay.
Collating your surveyor, your land gate applications, your build strata applications, your structural engineer, your fire engineer, your draftsman, your architect, your local government applications, your acoustic engineering, all of it. Some people just don't understand the work that's involved in that space to collate all those trades in a timely manner.
I guess it all falls to the individual, and if they haven't done it many times before, it can take a very long time to collate that.
Even if you have done it many times before, get a project manager. There's always something you forget. They're worth a couple of grand. Just put it on the cards and just have them schedule those trades, organize those trades, keep people moving, and you'll be lodged for CDC within the shortest period of time possible. I know people. I've had to work with people that think that, well, because I know someone, that I'm suddenly responsible for organizing their CDC, and you keep trying to say to them, I'm not a project manager. Like that's not what I'm contracted to do. If you contract me to do it, I'm happy to do it, but I don't know. People just don't value the process very well, especially for complex developments.
Yeah.
That's one tip and trap I think for apartments. For land development, for the love of God, put your applications in for planning and your DA concurrently.
Yeah.
Don't wait for subdivision approval before you lodge your DA. Do the two together. And on the side note, when you are talking about approvals, make sure you've got enough time to get you lodge your water corporation design and your Western Power lodgements well ahead of time. They're always delayed. Make sure that you've got those in place. If you're doing a renovation, again, have a nominated supervisor, please.
Yes.
Have a nominated supervisor.
Anyone that has any of these things, when you get to the other side of it, it's like massive learning lesson, uncovered a whole bunch of things and costs that I didn't realize. And now I wish, and next time I will always use the relevant professional and be prepared to pay for it. It's just the learning.
Yeah,
art.
everyone seems to think they can just do it on their own because they've got a bit of time.
Yeah. I could learn this.
That's not the point. Time is one thing, knowledge is another.
We touched on the R codes changes for medium density. What are some of the important parts to that investors need to know about? And I don't expect you to summarize the draft changes in 5 to 10 minutes, but
I'm just going to flick through probably here. I'm just going to flick through here. No, in all seriousness, there's a fair few changes. One is they're proposing to up the density bonus across different site categories. So, for example, if you've got a standard lot and you're bound by all 4 sides or 5 sides or whatever it is behind you, your standard zoning applies. If you're on a corner lot or you've got an amalgamated lot, you can apply for the next zoning up.
Okay.
And if you've got a big corner lot or you've amalgamated to be a big corner site, and you're a certain size, you can apply for the next zoning up again. So, for
Oh,
example, R30 becomes R35, and if you've got, then it might become
yeah,
R40
well,
after that. So that's a huge incentive to put bigger developments together.
larger sites, I guess, and more suitable locations in corners and yeah.
Yeah, more suitable, get amalgamated sites in more suitable locations, a more homogenous outcome for a location.
And I guess that is going to add more value to sites that are side by side, and you know the old adage of two neighbors wanting to sell together. Often I see that you can sometimes in the market at the moment get better prices for the two sold separately, because you deal with mum and dads on the two separate sales, and then you deal with the
Yeah.
larger developer on a combined sale, and the larger developer knows more about than the mums and dads and is prepared to pay less. So the market at the moment often pays less for larger sites because there isn't.
Which is the complete opposite of what's happening on the Sydney
Yeah.
and Queensland board at the moment. You look at those sites that are side by side, they go for mega bucks.
So it could be worth going out and buying select locations close to each other then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I like diverse neighborhoods. I like that eclectic look of having all different lots, different shapes and sizes. I don't necessarily like having monster
Yeah.
developments within a suburb, but a double block is not
Yeah, it's not
exactly a
exactly. Yeah.
monster development.
Especially if it's well located and
You know, if you're talking about Charles Street, for example, where you can't take advantage of R100 unless you've got 2,000 square meters, which is basically 4 blocks, that to me is excessive.
yeah.
But 2 blocks, yeah, it's all right.
Great.
You know, it's a local icon. Another one to look out for as well is that the single bed dwelling concession, which is a 1/3 concession for developing single bed houses, is actually being changed to being a small dwelling concession. Same sizes, so under 70 square meters on the footprint, but a small dwelling. So previously, if you wanted to do like a tiny house, for example, as a studio home, you weren't allowed to because it didn't have one bedroom and one other habitable room. That was a definition. So if you want to do a bunch of tiny houses, you actually get now a concessional size for that. On the same breath, if you want to do a small two-bedder, you also can as well. So it's bringing back the two-bed style villa developments that you might have seen through Morley and Dianella and Yokine and Chewett Hill and Spearwood and Burgoon and stuff, which is great. I mean, we need more two-bed villa product out there. You know, the old 2x1.
Especially when you consider, there are apartments that readily accommodate, two bedrooms with decent living area under 70 square meter size. So
It's
yeah,
really only for a 2x1.
yeah,
I mean, let's face it, it's not luxury accommodation. But the point is, it's affordable accommodation. There's dwelling diversity. We haven't had this product developed in Perth for 30 years. So, yeah, why do we need to have a $4,000 strata fee to live in a two-bedder?
strata fees, no one's happy with those.
No one's happy with those. The other one to look out for is landscaping is now being mandated for single tier
Okay.
dwellings. So basically, townhouses and
Yeah.
villas, but it's really only a 1.5 by 1.5 meter tree zone, and it can be incorporated anywhere. So it can be in the front setback area. It can be there's also one in the rear setback as well,
Okay.
and so it's not a huge
Yeah.
impost. I think we'll be able to manage that one.
Yeah.
I think the lot sizing issue, I think the two-bed issue, and I think the what else would there be?
Is there any changes in the over 55s area that I'd kind of seen rumored, or has that not made it?
Not yet. No, we are as part of, I guess, where I am now at HIA, we are trying to get a bit more improvement in that space and accommodate a bit more. But for the single housing models as well, they're bringing across some of the universal design elements from Design WA's Volume 2
Okay.
of the apartment guide, which is 20% have to be a silver level livable housing, etc. Or
Yeah.
so whether that translates to having, I don't know, it doesn't have the kind of
No.
bonus. You kind of have to wonder where their head is with the over 55 space. I don't know why it's still 5 and over.
Yeah.
But that said, they said, is it appropriate to have an over 55 dwelling just one dotted around the suburbs? And you sort of think, well, yes, then mum can live behind you or over the road, down the street in an appropriate house, and she'll
Yeah.
stay there forever. I don't know why that's a problem, to be
Yeah.
honest, but that's not my
Yep.
call.
Well, hopefully in the future. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of sellers that are downsizing, and when you ask where would you like to live, you'd really, yeah, the biggest pain for them is learning a new area, and I try to get them excited about it. Hey, like discover a new cafe and a new
Their friends are there, their doctors are there, their shops are there,
their
their
world.
grandkids know where they live. Like, yeah, it's not cool.
So yeah, there's definitely. I'd love to see something in the future on that because we're not getting any younger, or our parents aren't anyway.
None of us are, mate.
So
None of us are. I threw my back out the other day putting the washing out. Like,
definitely an old man injury.
yeah, it is an old man injury, right?
Is there any other areas of opportunity in the changes that you can see, or are you really going to need to get in case by case on
I think some
what
of the
you think?
opportunities are also going to present themselves in the low density code, which is going to be part A of volume one. So the medium density is part B of
Yep.
volume one. Part A will be a low density code. And I do have a strong feeling a lot of that will be informed by the interim review changes that are coming about.
Yeah, we'll probably have to get you back when those are clearer.
Yeah, that's a whole other code. Yeah, there'll definitely be some opportunities in the lower zoning spaces as well, not necessarily medium density, especially with regards to corner lots and certain allowances and different height allowances, etc., dual key options,
Yep.
etc. It's all pretty cool.
And I guess looking through to all the proposed changes in these medium density codes, what impact do you reckon it might have on the overall market? Is it going to see it, you know, put pressure or supply in different areas? Like,
It's going to put supply in areas that are currently short supplied. So, for example, like I said, the new two-bed product with a land component, that's going to be coming back again, which I think is going to be good.
yeah, nice.
There'll be a lot. I think there'll be it'll just force a lot of more two-story development as well, where there would have been singles otherwise because of the landscaping provision. But that said, if you're buying a courtyard now that's 40 square meters instead of 20, and you've got in a leafy green suburb and you've got a lovely jacaranda planted out back, you sort of have to ask, well, that might actually add value.
Yeah,
I don't know whether it's going to add value to the floor, but it'll certainly make suburbs a lot more appealing and infill suburbs. Like, I think that the days of Balga and Spearwood are very numbered with those infill outcomes, very numbered. And as long as local governments get on board and understand that this is a good outcome and don't then start fiddling around the edges with it.
yeah, flying their extra things over the top with split codes and trying to get control back.
Split codes are still a pain in the backside. But the new LPS regulations, which are due for gazettal any day now, basically elevates all the R codes to subsidiary legislation. So local governments will have to have this window to modify all their LPPs to fall in line because it's no longer a due regard document. Subsidiary legislation is exactly that. So if an LPP doesn't align with the R codes, it has to demonstrate why properly through there's a term that was used the other day. It was in a manner approved by the commission or something like that. And yeah, it's going to be pretty onerous for local governments to vary through LPPs. So yeah, watch this space.
Well, that's good in a way because some local governments have run to town on, their
Their interpretation.
yes.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, if you've got a real heritage argument or
Yeah.
you've got a real sense of place argument, yeah, for sure, you want to keep that. Everyone understands that. No one's ever going to argue against that. But when you just start saying things like no plot ratio for multiple dwellings, use land component only size, you sort of start sitting there going, I don't know about that. Where's your justification for that? If you're still allowing the dwelling type, why change the incentive
Make
to
it
provide it?
almost impossible to do the dwelling type.
Yeah, actually, there's another one in the medium density that might help people. Land component has gone away from plot ratio for multi-dwellings and is going back to a land only component, but it's reduced. So, for example, at R40, it was the 220 average and 180. And then for multi-dwellings, it used to be an average of 250 under the very, very old code of pre-2010. And then the plot ratio came in, which was 0.6, which basically meant, I don't know, on a 728 square meter block, you'd get 6 apartments, right?
Yeah.
But now it's changed to an average lot area of 115, not minimum, but average. So on a 728 square meter block, that's still 6 dwellings. So, but it's what it's doing, I think, is going to largely undermine the no plot ratio must use land component, and then we'll go into like, oh crap, we have to actually allow multiple dwellings now.
To actually apply the test. Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's going to be one to watch as well. There'll be some opportunities in that space there as
Yeah, it'll
well.
open up potentially some sites that haven't been developable, and I guess it always comes down.
Haven't been developed because of no plot ratio. And suddenly it's allowed to do that dwelling type based on a land component now. Yeah, so that's one to watch.
And I guess it all comes down to what's going to be met well by the market and what is, sensible development ultimately.
Yeah, I think it largely comes back to community perception as well. Is that if I say it's a plot ratio of 0.6, and what does that mean I can get on the site? Is it 6? Is it 8? Or is it 4? And then you say, well, it's depending on the lot, the size of the dwelling, whether you're doing 1 bedders or 3 bedders or 2 bedders. That's very grey for a community to understand and accept that one lot can have 900 different outcomes about what can be put on it. Whereas this gives basically everyone the opportunity to say 728 divided by 115 is 6.3, therefore it's six apartments maximum. And it doesn't matter whether it's 3 beds, 2 beds, or 1 beds, 6 apartments. That's all they're seeing.
So anything else to add before we wrap up? I know we can talk about all kinds of
Not really. We've kind of covered a fair bit.
Yeah, we have today, haven't we? Look, I really appreciate your time because I know how busy you
There's a
are.
lot. But there's a lot changing in this space, and I worry that people are just going to go out there expecting everything to be the same as it always was. And Perth is changing. Perth needs to maintain its garden city ideology, and without these kind of controls in place, we're just gonna end up like multiple dwellings in Dayton. It's just not what anyone wants. So
Yeah, sprawls.
stay on top of the regulations and the rules and understand what you can do. And if you don't understand, call someone.
So is there any way that you can help our listeners, or how do you do any consulting to private investors these days? Or
I do a little bit on the side. I don't really
Yeah.
do anything much
I know
anymore.
you're pretty occupied with everything else that you've got on your plate.
But occasionally I take on the odd little project here and there for people. But people who know where to find me can find me pretty easily enough. So
I think I'm just happy that you're involved in all these changes, and even if you can't help the individuals now, I feel like you're helping us all just being involved.
I'm happy to chat anytime. You can probably tell I can chat the ears off a gun dart, to quote Star Wars, but it's just one of those things. Like I'm happy to present. I'm happy to talk to people. It's just whether people need design services or not anymore.
Great. Well, thanks, mate. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Jared. Take care, mate.
Chat soon.